How Sir Richard of the Lea Paid His Debts. The long highway stretched straight on, gray and dusty in the sun. On either side were dikes full of water bordered by osiers, and far away in the distance stood the towers of Emmet Priory with tall poplar trees around. Along the causeway rode a knight with a score of stout men-at-arms behind him. The knight was clad in a plain, long robe of gray serge, gathered in at the waist with a broad leathern belt, from which hung a long dagger and a stout sword. But though he was so plainly dressed himself, the horse he rode was a noble barb, and its trappings were rich with silk and silver bells. So thus the band journeyed along the causeway between the dikes, till at last they reached the great gate of Emmet Priory. There the knight called to one of his men, and bade him knock at the porter's lodge with the heft of his sword. The porter was drowsing on his bench within the lodge, but at the knock he roused himself, and, opening the wicket, came hobbling forth, and greeted the knight, while a tame starling that hung in a wicker cage within piped out, "In caelo quies, in caelo quies," such being the words that the poor old lame porter had taught him to speak. "Where is thy prior?" asked the knight of the old porter. "He is at meat, good knight, and he looketh for thy coming," quoth the porter, "for, if I mistake not, thou art Sir Richard of the Lea." "I am Sir Richard of the Lea, then I will go seek him forthwith," said the knight. "But shall I not send thy horse to stable?" said the porter. "By Our Lady, it is the noblest nag, and the best harnessed, that e'er I saw in all my life before." And he stroked the horse's flank with his palm. "Nay," quoth Sir Richard, "the stables of this place are not for me, so make way, I prythee." So saying, he pushed forward, and, the gates being opened, he entered the stony courtyard of the priory, his men behind him. In they came with rattle of steel and clashing of swords, and ring of horses' feet on cobblestones, whereat a flock of pigeons that strutted in the sun flew with flapping wings to the high eaves of the round towers. While the knight was riding along the causeway to Emmet, a merry feast was toward in the refectory there. The afternoon sun streamed in through the great arched windows, and lay in broad squares of light upon the stone floor and across the board covered with a snowy linen cloth, whereon was spread a princely feast. At the head of the table sat Prior Vincent of Emmet, all clad in soft robes of fine cloth and silk. On his head was a black velvet cap picked out with gold, and around his neck hung a heavy chain of gold, with a great locket pendant therefrom. Beside him, on the arm of his great chair, roosted his favourite falcon, for the prior was fond of the gentle craft of hawking. On his right hand sat the Sheriff of Nottingham, in rich robes of purple, all trimmed about with fur, and on his left a famous doctor of law, in dark and sober garb. Below these sat the high cellarer of Emmet, and others chief among the brethren. Jest and laughter passed around, and all was as merry could be. The wizened face of the man of law was twisted into a wrinkled smile, for in his pouch were 80 golden angels that the prior had paid him in fee for the case betwixt him and Sir Richard of the Lea. The learned doctor had been paid beforehand, for he had not over much trust in the holy Vincent of Emmet. Quoth the Sheriff of Nottingham, "But art thou sure, Sir Prior, that thou hast the land so safe?" "Aye, marry," said Prior Vincent, smacking his lips after a deep draught of wine. "I have kept a close watch upon him, albeit he was unawares of the same, and I know right well that he hath no money to pay me withal." "Aye, true," said the man of law in a dry, husky voice. "His land is surely forfeit if he cometh not to pay. But, Sir Prior, thou must get a release beneath his sign manual, or else thou canst not hope to hold the land without trouble from him." "Yea," said the prior, "so thou hast told me ere now, but I know that this knight is so poor that he will gladly sign away his lands for 200 pounds of hard money." Then up spake the high cellarer, "Methinks it is a shame to so drive a misfortunate knight to the ditch. I think it sorrow that the noblest estate in Derbyshire should so pass away from him for a paltry 500 pounds. Truly, "How now?" broke in the prior in a quivering voice, his eyes glistening and his cheeks red with anger. "Dost thou prate to my very beard, Sarah? By St. Hubert, thou hadst best save thy breath to cool thy pottage, else it may scald thy mouth." "Nay," said the man of law smoothly, "I dare swear this same knight will never come to settlement this day, but will prove recreant. Nevertheless, we will seek some means to gain his lands from him, so never fear." But even as the doctor spoke, there came a sudden clatter of horses' hoofs and a jingle of iron mail in the courtyard below. Then up spake the prior, and called upon one of the brethren that sat below the salt, and bade him look out of the window and see who was below, albeit he knew right well it could be none but Sir Richard. So the brother arose and went and looked, and he said, "I see below a score of stout men-at-arms, and a knight just dismounting from his horse. He is dressed in long robes of grey, which, methinks, are of poor seeming, but the horse he rideth upon hath the richest coursing that ever I saw. The knight dismounts, and they come this way, and are even now below in the great hall." "Lo, see ye there now," quoth Prior Vincent, "here ye have a knight with so lean a purse as scarce to buy him a crust of bread to munch, yet he keeps a band of retainers, and puts rich trappings upon his horse's hide, while his own back goeth bare. Is it not well that such men should be brought low?" "But art thou sure," said the little doctor tremulously, "that this knight will do us no harm? Such as he are fierce when crossed, and he hath a band of naughty men at his heels. Mayhap thou hadst better give an extension of his debt." Thus he spake, for he was afraid Sir Richard might do him a harm. "Thou needst not fear," said the prior, looking down at the little man beside him. "This knight is gentle, and would as soon think of harming an old woman as thee." As the prior finished, a door at the lower end of the refectory swung open, and in came Sir Richard, with folded hands and head bowed upon his breast. Thus humbly he walked slowly up the hall, while his men-at-arms stood about the door. When he had come to where the prior sat, he knelt upon one knee. "Save and keep thee, Sir Prior," said he. "I am come to keep my day."
Then the first word that the prior said to him was, "Hast thou brought my money?" "Alas, I have not so much as 1 penny upon my body," said the knight, whereat the prior's eyes sparkled. "Now thou art a shrewd debtor, I wot," said he. "Then, Sir Sheriff, I drink to thee." But still the knight kneeled upon the hard stones, so the prior turned to him again. "What wouldst thou have?" quoth he sharply. At these words, a slow red mounted into the knight's cheeks, but still he knelt. "I would crave thy mercy," said he. "As thou hopest for heaven's mercy, show mercy to me. Strip me not of my lands, and so reduce a true knight to poverty." "Thy day is broken, and thy lands forfeit," said the man of law, plucking up his spirits at the knight's humble speech. Quoth Sir Richard, "Thou man of law, wilt thou not befriend me in mine hour of need?" "Nay," said the other, "I hold with this holy prior, who hath paid me my fees in hard gold, so that I am bounder to him." "Wilt thou not be my friend, Sir Sheriff?" said Sir Richard. "Nay, 'fore heaven," quoth the Sheriff of Nottingham, "this is no business of mine, yet I will do what I may." And he nudged the prior beneath the cloth with his knee. "Wilt thou not ease him of some of his debt, Sir Prior?" At this the prior smiled grimly. "Pay me 300 pounds, Sir Richard," said he, and I will give thee quittance of thy debt. Thou knowest, Sir Prior, that it is as easy for me to pay 400 pounds as 300 pounds. But wilt thou not give me another 12-month to pay my debt?"
"Not another day," said the prior sternly. "And is this all thou wilt do for me?" asked the knight. "Now, out upon thee, false knight!" cried the prior, bursting forth in anger. "Either pay thy debt, as I have said, or release thy land and get thee gone from out my hall." Then Sir Richard arose to his feet. "Thou false, lying priest," said he, in so stern a voice that the man of law shrunk affrighted. "I am no false knight, as thou knowest full well, but have even held my place in the press and the tourney. Hast thou so little courtesy that thou wouldst see a true knight kneel for all this time, or see him come into thy hall and never offer him meat or drink?" Then quoth the man of law in a trembling voice, "This is surely an ill way to talk of matters appertaining to business. Let us be mild in speech. What wilt thou pay this knight, Sir Prior, to give thee release of his land?" "I would have given him 200 pounds, quoth the prior. "But since he hath spoken so vilely to my teeth, not one groat over 100 pounds will he get." "Hadst thou offered me 1,000 pounds, false prior," said the knight, "thou wouldst not have gotten inch of my land." Then, turning to where his men-at-arms stood near the door, he called, "Come hither," and beckoned with his finger, whereupon the tallest of them all came forward and handed him a long leathern bag. Sir Richard took the bag and shot from it upon the table a glittering stream of golden money. "Bear in mind, Sir Prior," said he, "that thou hast promised me quittance for 300 pounds. Not 1 farthing above that shalt thou get." So saying, he counted out 300 pounds and pushed it toward the prior.
But now the prior's hands dropped at his sides, and the prior's head hung upon his shoulder. For not only had he lost all hopes of the land, but he had forgiven the knight 100 pounds of his debt, and had needlessly paid the man of law 80 angels. To him he turned, and quoth he, "Give me back my money that thou hast." "Nay," cried the other shrilly, "it is but my fee that thou didst pay me, and thou gettest it not back again." And he hugged his gown about him. "Now, Sir Prior," quoth Sir Richard, "I have held my day and paid all the dues demanded of me, so as there is no more betwixt us, I leave this vile place straightway." So saying, he turned upon his heel and strode away. All this time the sheriff had been staring with wide-opened eyes and mouth agape at the tall man-at-arms, who stood as though carved out of stone. At last he gasped out, "Reynold Greenleaf!" At this the tall man-at-arms, who was no other than Little John, turned, grinning to the sheriff. "I give thee good den, fair gossip," quoth he. "I would say, sweet sheriff, that I have heard all thy pretty talk this day, and it shall be duly told unto Robin Hood. So farewell for the nonce, till we meet again in Sherwood Forest." Then he also turned and followed Sir Richard down the hall, leaving the sheriff, all pale and amazed, shrunk together upon his chair. A merry feast it was to which Sir Richard came, but a sorry lot he left behind him, and little hunger had they for the princely food spread before them. Only the learned doctor was happy, for he had his fee. Now a 12-month-ended day passed since Prior Vincent of Emmet's sat at feast, and once more the mellow fall of another year had come.
But the year had brought great change, I wot, to the lands of Sir Richard of the Lea, for where before shaggy wild grasses grew upon the meadowlands, now all stretch away in golden stubble, betokening that a rich and plentiful crop had been gathered therefrom. A year had made a great change in the castle also, for where were empty moats and the crumbling of neglect, all was now orderly and well kept. Bright shone the sun on battlement and tower, and in the blue air overhead a hawk of clattering jackdaws flew around the gilded weather-vane and spire. Then, in the brightness of the morning, the drawbridge fell across the moat with a rattle and clank of chains, the gate of the castle swung slowly open, and a goodly array of steel-clad men-at-arms, with a knight all clothed in chain-mail, as white as frost on briar and thorn of a winter morning, came flashing out from the castle courtyard. In his hand the knight held a great spear, from the point of which fluttered a blood-red pennant as broad as the palm of one's hand. So this troop came forth from the castle, and in the midst of them walked 3 pack horses laden with parcels of divers shapes and kinds. Thus rode forth good Sir Richard of the Lea to pay his debt to Robin Hood this bright and merry morn. Along the highway they wended their way, with measured tramp of feet and rattle and jingle of sword and harness. Onward they marched, till they came nigh to Denby, where from the top of a hill they saw over beyond the town many gay flags and streamers floating in the bright air. Then Sir Richard turned to the man-at-arms nearest to him. "What does toward yonder at Denby today?" quoth he. "Please your worship," answered the man-at-arms, "a merry fair is held there today, and a great wrestling match, to which many folk have come, for a prize hath been offered of a pipe of red wine, a fair golden ring, and a pair of gloves, all of which go to the best wrestler." "Now by my faith," quoth Sir Richard, who loved good manly sports right well, "this will be a goodly thing to see. Methinks we have to stay a little while on our journey and see this merry sport." So he turned his horse's head aside toward Denby and the fair, and thither he and his men made their way. There they found a great hubbub of merriment. Flags and streamers were floating, tumblers were tumbling on the green, bagpipes were playing, and lads and lasses were dancing to the music. But the crowd were gathered most of all around a ring where the wrestling was going forward, and thither Sir Richard and his men turned their steps. Now when the judges of the wrestling saw Sir Richard coming and knew who he was, the chief of them came down from the bench where he and the others sat, and went to the knight and took him by the hand, beseeching him to come and sit with them and judge the sport. So Sir Richard got down from his horse and went with the others to the bench raised beside the ring. Now there had been great doings that morning, for a certain yeoman named Egbert, who came from Stoke over in Staffordshire, had thrown with ease all those that came against him. But a man of Denby, well known through all the countryside as William of the Scar, had been biding his time with the Stoke man. So when Egbert had thrown everyone else, stout William leaped into the ring. Then a tough bout followed, and at last he threw Egbert heavily, whereat there was a great shouting and shaking of hands, for all the Denby men were proud of their wrestler. When Sir Richard came, he found stout William, puffed up by the shouts of his friends, walking up and down the ring, daring anyone to come and try a throw with him. "Come one, come all," quoth he. "Here stand I, William of the Scar, against any man. If there is none in Derbyshire to come against me, come all who will, from Nottingham, Stafford, or York. And if I do not make them one and all root the ground with their noses like swine in the forests, call me no more brave William the wrestler." At this all laughed, but above all the laughter a loud voice was heard to cry out, "Since thou talkest so big, here cometh one from Nottinghamshire to try a fall with thee, fellow." And straightway a tall youth with a tough quarterstaff in his hand came pushing his way through the crowd and at last leapt lightly over the rope into the ring. He was not as heavy as stout William, but he was taller and broader in the shoulders, and all his joints were well knit. Sir Richard looked upon him keenly. Then, turning to one of the judges, he said, "Knowest thou who this youth is? Methinks I have seen him before." "Nay," said the judge, "he is a stranger to me." Meantime, without a word, the young man, laying aside his quarterstaff, began to take off his jerkin and body clothing until he presently stood with naked arms and body. And a comely sight he was when so bared to the view, for his muscles were cut round and smooth and sharp like swift-running water.
And now each man spat upon his hands, and clapping them upon his knees, squatted down, watching the other keenly so as to take the vantage of him in the grip. Then like a flash they leaped together, and a great shout went up, for William had gotten the better hold of the two. For a short time they strained and struggled and writhed, and then stout William gave his most cunning trip and throw, but the stranger met it with greater skill than his, and so the trip came to naught. Then, of a sudden, with a twist and a wrench, the stranger loosed himself, and he of the scar found himself locked in a pair of arms that fairly made his ribs crack. So with heavy, hot breathing they stood for a while straining, their bodies all glistening with sweat, and great drops of sweat trickling down their faces. But the stranger's hug was so close that at last stout William's muscles softened under his grip, and he gave a sob. Then the youth put forth all his strength and gave a sudden trip with his heel and a cast over his right hip, and down stout William went with a sickening thud, and lay as though he would never move hand nor foot again. But now no shout went up for the stranger, but an angry murmur was heard among the crowd, so easily had he won the match. Then one of the judges, a kinsman to William of the Scar, rose with trembling lip and baleful look. Quoth he, "If thou hast slain that man, it will go ill with thee, let me tell thee, fellow." But the stranger answered boldly, "He took his chance with me as I took mine with him. No law can touch me to harm me, even if I slew him, so that it was fairly done in the wrestling ring." "That we shall see," said the judge, scowling upon the youth, while once more an angry murmur ran around the crowd. For as I have said, the men of Denby were proud of stout William of the Scar.
Then up spoke Sir Richard gently. "Nay," said he, "the youth is right. If the other dieth, he dieth in the wrestling ring, where he took his chance and was cast fairly enow." But in the meantime 3 men had come forward and lifted stout William from the ground, and found that he was not dead, though badly shaken by his heavy fall. Then the chief judge rose and said, "Young man, the prize is duly thine. Here is the red gold ring, and here the gloves, and yonder stands the pipe of wine to do with whatsoever thou dost list." At this, the youth, who had donned his clothes and taken up his staff again, bowed without a word. Then, taking the gloves and the ring, and thrusting the one into his girdle and slipping the other upon his thumb, he turned and, leaping lightly over the ropes again, made his way through the crowd and was gone. "Now, I wonder who yon youth may be," said the judge, turning to Sir Richard. "He seemeth like a stout Saxon from his red cheeks and fair hair. This William of ours is a stout man too, and never have I seen him cast in the ring before, albeit he hath not yet striven with such great wrestlers as Thomas of Cornwall, Dickon of York, and young David of Doncaster. Hath he not a firm foot in the ring, thinkest thou, Sir Richard?" "Aye, truly, and yet this youth threw him fairly, and with wondrous ease. I much wonder who he can be." Thus said Sir Richard in a thoughtful voice. For a time the knight stood talking to those about him, but at last he arose and made ready to depart. So he called his men about him, and tightening the girths of his saddle, he mounted his horse once more.
Meanwhile, the young stranger had made his way through the crowd, but as he passed, he heard all around him such words muttered as, "Look at the cockerel! Behold how he plumeth himself! I dare swear he cast good William unfairly. Yea, truly, saw you not birdlime upon his hands? It would be well to cut his coxcomb." To all this the stranger paid no heed, but strode proudly about as though he heard it not. So he walked slowly across the green to where the booth stood wherein was dancing, and standing at the door he looked in on the sport. As he stood thus, a stone struck his arm of a sudden with a sharp jar, and turning, he saw that an angry crowd of men had followed him from the wrestling ring. Then, when they saw him turn so, a great hooting and yelling arose from all, so that the folk came running out from the dancing booth to see what was to do.
At last a tall, broad-shouldered, burly blacksmith strode forward from the crowd, swinging a mighty blackthorn club in his hand. "Wouldst thou come here to our fair town of Denby, thou jack-in-the-box, to overcome a good honest lad with vile juggling tricks?" growled he in a deep voice like the bellow of an angry bull. "Take that, then." And of a sudden he struck a blow at the youth that might have felled an ox. But the other turned the blow deftly aside, and gave back another so terrible that the Denby man went down with a groan, as though he had been smitten by lightning. When they saw their leader fall, the crowd gave another angry shout, but the stranger placed his back against the tent near which he stood, swinging his terrible staff, and so fell had been the blow that he struck the stout smith that none dared to come within the measure of his cudgel, so the press crowded back like a pack of dogs from a bear at bay.
But now some coward hand from behind threw a sharp jagged stone that smote the stranger on the crown, so that he staggered back, and the red blood gushed from the cut and ran down his face and over his jerkin. Then, seeing him dazed with this vile blow, the crowd rushed upon him, so that they overbore him, and he fell beneath their feet. Now it might have gone ill with the youth, even to the losing of his young life, had not Sir Richard come to this fair. For of a sudden shouts were heard, and steel flashed in the air, and blows were given with the flat of swords, while through the midst of the crowd Sir Richard of the Lea came spurring on his white horse. Then the crowd, seeing the steel-clad knight and the armed men, melted away like snow on the warm hearth, leaving the young man all bloody and dusty upon the ground. Finding himself free, the youth arose and, wiping the blood from his face, looked up. Quoth he, "Sir Richard of the Lea, mayhap thou hast saved my life this day." "Who art thou that knowest Sir Richard of the Lea so well?" quoth the knight. "Methinks I have seen thy face before, young man." "Yea, thou hast," said the youth, "for men call me David of Doncaster." "Ha," said Sir Richard, "I wonder that I knew thee not, David. But thy beard hath grown longer, and thou thyself art more set in manhood since this day 12-month. Come hither into the tent, David, and wash the blood from thy face. And thou, Ralph, bring him straightway a clean jerkin. Now I am sorry for thee, yet I am right glad that I have had a chance to pay a part of my debt of kindness to thy good master Robin Hood, for it might have gone ill with thee had I not come, young man." So saying, the knight led David into the tent, and there the youth washed the blood from his face and put on the clean jerkin. In the meantime, a whisker had gone around from those that stood nearest that this was none other than the great David of Doncaster, the best wrestler in all the mid-country, who only last spring had cast stout Adam a Lincoln in the ring at Selby in Yorkshire, and now held the mid-country champion belt. Thus it happened that when young David came forth from the tent along with Sir Richard, the blood all washed from his face, and his soiled jerkin changed for a clean one, no sounds of anger were heard, but all pressed forward to see the young man, feeling proud that one of the great wrestlers of England should have entered the ring at Denby Fair. For thus fickle is a mass of men. Then Sir Richard called aloud, "Friends, this is David of Doncaster, so think it no shame that your Denby man was cast by such a wrestler. He beareth you no ill will for what hath passed, but let it be a warning to you how ye treat strangers henceforth. Had ye slain him, it would have been an ill day for you, for Robin Hood would have harried your town as the kestrel harries the dovecote. I have bought the pipe of wine from him, and now I give it freely to you to drink as ye list, but never hereafterward fall upon a man for being a stout yeoman." At this all shouted amain, but in truth they thought more of the wine than of the knight's words. Then Sir Richard, with David beside him and his men-at-arms around, turned about and left the fair.
But in after days, when the men that saw that wrestling bout were bent with age, they would shake their heads when they heard of any stalwart game and say, "Aye, aye, but thou shouldst have seen the great David of Doncaster cast stout William of the Scar at Denby Fair." Robin Hood stood in the merry green wood with Little John and most of his stout yeomen around him, awaiting Sir Richard's coming. At last, a glint of steel was seen through the brown forest leaves, and forth from the covert into the open rode Sir Richard at the head of his men. He came straight forward to Robin Hood, and leaping from off his horse, clasped the yeoman in his arms. "Why, how now?" said Robin, after a time, holding Sir Richard off and looking at him from top to toe. "Methinks thou art a gayer bird than when I saw thee last." "Yes, thanks to thee, Robin," said the knight, laying his hand upon the yeoman's shoulder. "But for thee I would have been wandering in misery in a far country by this time. But I have kept my word, Robin, and have brought back the money that thou didst lend me, and which I have doubled 4 times over again, and so become rich once more. Along with this money I have brought a little gift to thee and thy brave men from my dear lady and myself." Then, turning to his men, he called aloud, "Bring forth the pack horses!" But Robin stopped him. "Nay, Sir Richard," said he, "think it not bold of me to cross thy bidding, but we of Sherwood do no business till after we have eaten and drunk." Whereupon, taking Sir Richard by the hand, he led him to the seat beneath the greenwood tree, while others of the chief men of the band came and seated themselves around.
Then quoth Robin, "How cometh it that I saw young David of Doncaster with thee and thy men, Sir Knight?" Then straightway the knight told all about his stay at Dunby, and of the happening at the fair, and how it was like to go hard with young David. So he told his tale, and quoth he, "It was this, good Robin, that kept me so late on the way, otherwise I would have been here an hour agone." Then when he had done speaking, Robin stretched out his hand and grasped the knight's palm. Quoth he in a trembling voice, "I owe thee a debt I can never hope to repay, Sir Richard, for let me tell thee, I would rather lose my right hand than have such ill befall young David of Doncaster as seemed like to come upon him at Denby." So they talked until after a while one came forward to say that the feast was spread, whereupon all arose and went thereto. When at last it was done, the knight called upon his men to bring the pack horses forward, which they did according to his bidding. Then one of the men brought the knight a strong box, which he opened, and took from it a bag, and counted out 500 pounds, the sum he had gotten from Robin. "Sir Richard," quoth Robin, "thou wilt pleasure us all if thou wilt keep that money as a gift from us of Sherwood. Is it not so, my lads?" Then all shouted "Aye" with a mighty voice. "I thank you all deeply," said the knight earnestly, "but think it not ill of me if I cannot take it. Gladly have I borrowed it from you, but it may not be that I can take it as a gift." Then Robin Hood said no more, but gave the money to Little John to put away in the treasury. For he had shrewdness enough to know that naught breeds ill will and heart bitterness like gifts forced upon one that cannot choose but take them. Then Sir Richard had the packs laid upon the ground and opened, whereupon a great shout went up that made the forest ring again. For lo, there were 10 bows of finest Spanish yew, all burnished till they shone again, and each bow inlaid with fanciful figures in silver, yet not inlaid so as to mar their strength. Beside these were 10 quivers of leather embroidered with golden thread, and in each quiver were a score of shafts with burnished heads that shone like silver. Each shaft was feathered with peacock's plumes, in-knocked with silver. Sir Richard gave to each yeoman a bow and a quiver of arrows, but to Robin he gave a stout bow inlaid with the cunningest workmanship in gold, while each arrow in his quiver was in-knocked with gold. Then all shouted again for joy of the fair gift, and all swore among themselves that they would die if need be for Sir Richard and his lady. At last the time came when Sir Richard must go, whereupon Robin Hood called his band around him, and each man of the yeomen took a torch in his hand to light the way through the woodlands.
So they came to the edge of Sherwood, and there the knight kissed Robin upon the cheeks, and left him and was gone. Thus Robin Hood helped a noble knight out of his dire misfortunes, that else would have smothered the happiness from his life.
Little John turns barefoot friar. Cold winter had passed and spring had come. No leafy thickness had yet clad the woodlands, but the budding leaves hung like a tender mist about the trees. In the open country, the meadowlands lay a sheeny green, the cornfields a dark velvety color, for they were thick and soft with the growing blades. The ploughboys shouted in the sun, and in the purple new-turned furrows flocks of birds hunted for fat worms. All the broad, moist earth smiled in the warm light, and each little green hill clapped its hand for joy. On a deer's hide, stretched on the ground in the open in front of the greenwood tree, sat Robin Hood, basking in the sun like an old dog-fox. Leaning back with his hands clasped about his knees, he lazily watched Little John rolling a stout bowstring from long strands of hempen thread, wetting the palms of his hands ever and anon, and rolling the cord upon his thigh. Nearby sat Allen a Dale, fitting a new string to his harp. Quoth Robin at last, "Methinks I would rather roam this forest in the gentle springtime than be king of all merry England. What palace in the broad world is as fair as this sweet woodland just now, and what king in all the world hath such appetite for plovers' eggs and lampreys as I for juicy venison and sparkling ale? Gaffer Swanhold speaks truly when he saith, 'Better a crust with content than honey with a sour heart.'" "Yea," quoth Little John, as he rubbed his new-made bowstring with yellow beeswax,
"the life we lead is the life for me. Thou speakest of the springtime, but methinks even the winter hath its own joys. Thou and I, good master, have had more than one merry day, this winter past at the Blue Boar. Dost thou not remember that night thou and Will Stutely and Friar Tuck and I passed at that same hostelry with the two beggars and the strolling friar?" "Yea," quoth merry Robin, laughing, "that was the night that Will Stutely must needs snatch a kiss from the stout hostess, and got a cannikin of ale emptied over his head for his pains." "Truly, it was the same," said Little John, laughing also. "Methinks that was a goodly song that the strolling friar sang. Friar Tuck, thou hast a quick ear for a tune. Dost thou not remember it?" "I did have the catch of it one time," said Tuck. "Let me see," and he touched his forefinger to his forehead in thought, humming to himself, and stopping ever and anon to fit what he had got to what he searched for in his mind. At last he found it all, and clearing his throat, sang merrily. "In the blossoming hedge the robin cock sings, for the sun it is merry and bright. And he joyfully hops and he flutters his wings, for his heart is all full of delight. For the May bloometh fair, and there's little of care, and plenty to eat in the Maytime rare. When the flowers all die, then off he will fly, to keep himself warm in some jolly old barn, where the snow and the wind neither chill him nor harm."
And such is the life of the strolling friar, with a plenty to eat and to drink, for the good wife will keep him a seat by the fire, and the pretty girls smile at his wink. Then he lustily trolls as he onward strolls, a rollicking song for the saving of souls. When the wind doth blow, with the coming of snow, there's a place by the fire for the fatherly friar, and a crab in the bowl for his heart's desire. Thus Friar Tuck sang in a rich and mellow voice, rolling his head from side to side in time with the music. And when he had done, all clapped their hands and shouted with laughter, for the song fitted him well. "In very sooth," quoth Little John, "it is a goodly song,
and were I not a yeoman of Sherwood Forest, I had rather be a strolling friar than aught else in the world." "Yea, it is a goodly song," said Robin Hood, "but methought those two burly beggars told the merrier tales and led the merrier life. Dost thou not remember what that great black-bearded fellow told of his begging at the fair in York?" "Yea," said Little John, "but what told the friar of the harvest home in Kentshire? I hold that he led a merrier life than the other two." "Truly, for the honour of the cloth," quoth Friar Tuck, "I hold with my good gossip, Little John." "Now," quoth Robin, "I hold to mine own mind. But what sayest thou, Little John, to a merry adventure this fair day? Take thou a friar's gown from our chest of strange garments, and don the same, and I will stop the first beggar I meet, and change clothes with him."
Then let us wander the country about this sweet day, and see what befalls each of us. "That fitteth my mind," quoth Little John. "So let us forth, say I." Thereupon Little John and Friar Tuck went to the storehouse of the band, and there chose for the yeoman the robe of a grey friar. Then they came forth again, and a mighty roar of laughter went up, for not only had the band never seen Little John in such guise before, but the robe was too short for him by a good palm's breadth. But Little John's hands were folded in his loose sleeves, and Little John's eyes were cast upon the ground, and at his girdle hung a great, long string of beads. And now Little John took up his stout staff, at the end of which hung a chubby little leathern pottle, such as palmers carry at the tips of their staves. But in it was something, I wot, more like good Malmsey than cold spring water, such as godly pilgrims carry. Then up rose Robin, and took his stout staff in his hand likewise, and slipped 10 golden angels into his pouch, for no beggar's garb was among the stores of the band, so he was fain to run his chance of meeting a beggar and buying his clothes of him. So, all being made ready, the two yeomen set forth on their way, striding lustily along all in the misty morning. Thus they walked down the forest path until they came to the highway, and then along the highway till it split in twain, leading on one hand to Blythe and on the other to Gainsborough. Here the yeoman stopped. Quoth jolly Robin, "Take thou the road to Gainsborough, and I will take that to Blythe. So fare thee well, holy father, and mayest thou not ha' cause to count thy beads in earnest ere we meet again."
"Good den, good beggar that is to be," quoth Little John, "and mayst thou have no cause to beg for mercy ere I see thee next." So each stepped sturdily upon his way until a green hill rose between them, and the one was hid from the sight of the other. Little John walked along whistling, for no one was nigh upon all the road. In the budding hedges the little birds twittered merrily, and on either hand the green hills swept up to the sky, the great white clouds of springtime sailing slowly over their crowns in lazy flight. Up hill and down dale walked Little John, the fresh wind blowing in his face, and his robes fluttering behind him, and so at last he came to a crossroad that led to Tuxford. Here he met 3 pretty lasses, each bearing a basket of eggs to market. Quoth he, "Whither away, fair maids?" And he stood in their path, holding his staff in front of them to stop them. Then they huddled together and nudged one another, and one presently spake up and said, "We are going to the Tuxford market, holy friar, to sell our eggs." "Now, out upon it," quoth Little John, looking upon them with his head on one side. "Surely it is a pity that such fair lasses should be forced to carry eggs to market. Let me tell you, an I had the shaping of things in this world, ye should all 3 have been clothed in the finest silks and ride upon milk-white horses with pages at your side and feed upon nothing but whipped cream and strawberries, for such a life would surely befit your looks." At this speech, all 3 of the pretty maids looked down, blushing and simpering. One said, "La!" another, "Marry, and make it sport of us," and the third, "Listen now to the holy man." But at the same time they looked at Little John from out the corners of their eyes.
"Now look you," said Little John,
I cannot see such dainty damsels as ye are carrying baskets along a high road. Let me take them mine own self, and one of you, if you will, may carry my stuff for me." "Nay," said one of the lasses, "but thou canst not carry 3 baskets all at one time." "Yea, but I can," said Little John, "and that I will show you presently. I thank the good Saint Wilfred that he hath given me a pretty wit. Look ye now, here I take this great basket, so. Here I tie my rosary around the handle, thus, and here I slip the rosary over my head and sling the basket upon my back in this wise." And Little John did according to his words, the basket hanging down behind him like a peddler's pack. Then, giving his staff to one of the maids, and taking a basket upon either arm, he turned his face toward Tuxford town, and stepped forth merrily, a laughing maid on either side, and one walking ahead carrying the staff. In this wise they journeyed along, and every one they met stopped and looked after them, laughing, for never had anybody seen such a merry sight as this tall, strapping gray friar, with robes all too short for him, laden with eggs, and tramping the road with 3 pretty lasses. For this Little John cared not a whit, but when such folks gave jesting words to him, he answered back as merrily, speech for speech. So they stepped along toward Tuxford, chatting and laughing, until they came nigh to the town. Here Little John stopped and set down the baskets, for he did not care to go into the town, lest he should perchance meet some of the sheriff's men. "Alas, sweet chucks," quoth he, "here I must leave you. I had not thought to come this way, but I am glad that I did so. Now, ere we part, we must drink sweet friendship."
So saying, he unslung the leathern pottle from the end of his staff, and drawing the stopper therefrom, he handed it to the lass, who had carried his staff, first wiping the mouth of the pottle upon his sleeve. Then each lass took a fair drink of what was within, and when it had passed all around, Little John finished what was left, so that not another drop could be squeezed from it. Then, kissing each lass sweetly, he wished them all good den, and left them, but the maid stood looking after him as he walked away whistling. "What a pity," quoth one, "that such a stout, lusty lad should be in holy orders." "Marry," quoth Little John to himself, as he strode along, "yon was no such ill happening. St. Dunstan send me more of the like." After he had trudged along for a time, he began to wax thirsty again in the warmth of the day. He shook his leathern pottle beside his ear, but not a sound came therefrom. Then he placed it to his lips and tilted it high aloft, but not a drop was there. Little John, said he sadly to himself, shaking his head the while, "woman will be thy ruin yet, if thou dost not take better care of thyself." But at last he reached the crest of a certain hill, and saw below a sweet little thatched inn lying snugly in the dale beneath him, toward which the road dipped sharply. At the sight of this, a voice within him cried aloud, "I give thee joy, good friend, for yonder is thy heart's delight, to wit, a sweet rest and a cup of brown beer." So he quickened his pace down the hill, and so came to the little inn, from which hung a sign with a stag's head painted upon it. In front of the door a clucking hen was scratching in the dust, with the brood of chickens about her heels. The sparrows were chattering of household affairs under the eaves,
and all was so sweet and peaceful that Little John's heart laughed within him. Beside the door stood 2 stout cobs, with broad, soft-padded saddles, well fitted for easy traveling, and speaking of rich guests in the parlor. In front of the door, 3 merry fellows, a tinker, a peddler, and a beggar, were seated on a bench in the sun, quaffing stout ale. "I give you good den, sweet friends," quoth Little John, striding up to where they sat. "Give thee good den, holy father," quoth the merry beggar with a grin. "But look thee, thy gown is too short. Thou had best cut a piece off the top and tack it to the bottom, so that it may be long enough. But come, sit beside us here and take a taste of ale,
if thy vows forbid thee not." "Nay," quoth Little John, also grinning, "the blessed Saint Dunstan hath given me a free dispensation for all indulgence in that line." And he thrust his hand into his pouch for money to pay his score. "Truly," quoth the tinker, "without thy looks belie thee, holy friar, the good Saint Dunstan was wise, for without such dispensation his votaries like to have many a penance to make. Nay, take thy hand from out thy pouch, brother, for thou shalt not pay this shot. Ho, landlord, a pot of ale." So the ale was brought and given to Little John. Then, blowing the froth a little way to make room for his lips, he tilted the bottom of the pot higher and higher, till it pointed to the sky, and he had to shut his eyes to keep the dazzle of the sunshine out of them. Then he took the pot away, for there was nothing in it, and heaved a full, deep sigh, looking at the others with moist eyes and shaking his head solemnly.
"Ho, landlord!" cried the peddler, "bring this good fellow another pot of ale, for truly it is a credit to us all to have one among us who can empty a cannikin so lustily." So they talked among themselves merrily, until after a while quoth Little John, "Who rideth those two nags yonder?" "Two holy men like thee, brother," quoth the beggar. "They are now having a goodly feast within, for I smelled the steam of a boiled pullet just now. The landlady saith they come from Fountain Abbey in Yorkshire, and go to Lincoln on matters of business." "They are a merry couple," said the tinker, "for one is as lean as an old wife's spindle, and the other as fat as a suet pudding." "Talking of fatness," said the peddler, "thou thyself lookest none too ill-fed, holy friar." "Nay, truly," said Little John, "thou seest in me what the holy Saint Dunstan can do for them that serve him upon a handful of parched peas and a trickle of cold water." At this, a great shout of laughter went up. "Truly, it is a wondrous thing," quoth the beggar. "I would have made my vow to see the masterly manner in which thou didst tuck away yon pot of ale, that thou hadst not tasted clear water for a brace of months. Has not this same holy Saint Dunstan taught thee a goodly song or two?" "Why, as for that," quoth Little John, grinning, "mayhap he hath lent me aid to learn a ditty or so." "Then prithee, let us hear how he hath taught thee," quoth the tinker. At this, Little John cleared his throat, and after a word or two about a certain hoarseness that troubled him, sang thus. "Ah, pretty, pretty maid, whither dost thou go? I pry thee, wait for thy lover also, and we'll gather the rose as it sweetly blows, for the merry, merry winds are below, oh, oh, ing!" Now it seemed as though Little John's songs were never to get sung, for he had got no farther than this when the door of the inn opened, and out came the two brothers of Fountain Abbey, the landlord following them, and, as the saying is, washing his hands with humble soap. But when the brothers of Fountain Abbey saw who it was that sang, and how he was clad in the robes of a grey friar, they stopped suddenly, the fat little brother drawing his heavy eyebrows together in a mighty frown, and the thin brother twisting up his face as though he had sour beer in his mouth. Then, as Little John gathered his breath for a new verse, "How now?" roared forth the fat brother, his voice coming from him like loud thunder from a little cloud. "Thou naughty fellow, is this a fit place for one in thy garb to tipple and sing profane songs?" "Nay," quoth Little John, "sin I cannot tipple and sing, like your worship's reverence in such a goodly place as Fountain Abbey, I must e'en tipple and sing where I can." "Now out upon thee!" cried the tall, lean brother in a harsh voice. "Now out upon thee, that thou shouldst so disgrace thy cloth by this talk and bearing." "Marry, come up," quoth Little John. "Disgrace, sayest thou? Methinks it is more disgrace for one of our garb to wring hard-earned farthings out of the gripe of poor lean peasants. It is not so, brother?"
At this, the tinker and the peddler and the beggar nudged one another and all grinned, and the friars scowled blackly at Little John. But they could think of nothing further to say, so they turned to their horses. Then Little John arose of a sudden from the bench where he sat, and ran to where the brothers of Fountain Abbey were mounting. Quoth he, "Let me hold your bridles for you. Truly, your words have smitten my sinful heart, so that I will abide no longer in this den of evil, but will go forward with you. No vile temptation, I wot, will fall upon me in such holy company." "Nay, fellow," said the lean brother harshly, for he saw that Little John made sport of them. "We want none of thy company, so get thee gone." "Alas," quoth Little John, "I am truly sorry that ye like me not nor my company. But as for leaving you, it may not be, for my heart is so moved that willy-nilly I must go with you for the sake of your holy company." Now, at this talk, all the good fellows on the bench grinned till their teeth glistened, and even the landlord could not forbear to smile. As for the friars, they looked at one another with a puzzled look, and knew not what to do in the matter. They were so proud that it made them feel sick with shame to think of riding along the high road with a strolling friar, in robes all too short for him, running beside them. But yet they could not make Little John stay against his will, for they knew he could crack the bones of both of them in a twinkling were he so minded. Then up spake the fat brother more mildly than he had done before. "Nay, good brother," said he, "we will ride fast, and now we'll tire to death at the pace."
"Truly I am grateful to thee for the thought of me," quoth Little John. "But have no fear, brother, my limbs are stout, and I could run like a hare from here to Gainsborough." At these words a sound of laughing came from the bench, whereat the lean brother's wrath boiled over, like water into the fire, with great fuss and noise. "Now out upon thee, thou naughty fellow!" he cried. "Art thou not ashamed to bring disgrace so upon our cloth? Bide thee here, thou sot, with these porkers. Thou art no fit company for us." "La ye there now," quoth Little John. "Thou hearest, landlord, thou art not fit company for these holy men. Go back to thine alehouse. Nay, if these most holy brothers of mine do but give me the word, I'll beat thy head with this stout staff till it is as soft as whipped eggs." At these words, a great shout of laughter went up from those on the bench, and the landlord's face grew red as a cherry from smothering his laugh in his stomach. But he kept his merriment down, for he wished not to bring the ill will of the brothers of Fountain Abbey upon him by unseemly mirth. So the two brethren, as they could do naught else, having mounted their nags, turned their noses toward Lincoln and rode away. "I cannot stay longer, sweet friends," quoth Little John, as he pushed in betwixt the two cobs. "Therefore I wish you good den. Off we go, we three." So saying, he swung his stout staff over his shoulder and trudged off, measuring his pace with that of the two nags. The two brothers glowered at Little John when he so pushed himself betwixt them. Then they drew as far away from him as they could, so that the yeoman walked in the middle of the road.
Quoth he, "I am a gay feathered bird now. Truly, my dear Maltese cod would never know me in this dress. Thou mayst keep the cold pieces of the feast, friend, for I mean to live well and lustily while my money lasts, and my clothes are gay." So he turned and left Robin, and, crossing the stile, was gone. But Robin heard him singing from beyond the hedge as he strode away. "For Polly is smiling and Molly is glad when the beggar comes in at the door. And Jack and Dick call him a fine lusty lad, and the hostess runs up a great score. Then hey, Willie Wadikin, stay, Billy Wadikin, and let the brown ale flow free, the beggar's the man for me." Robin listened till the song ended in the distance. Then he also crossed the stile into the road, but turned his toes away from where the beggar had gone. The road led up a gentle hill, and up the hill Robin walked, a half-score or more of bags dangling about his legs. Onward he strolled for a long time, but other adventure he found not.
The road was bare of all else but himself as he went kicking up little clouds of dust at each footstep, for it was noontide, the most peaceful time of all the day next to twilight. All the earth was silent in the restfulness of eating time. The plow horses stood in the furrow munching with great bags over their noses, holding sweet food. The plowman sat under the hedge and the plowboy also, and they too were munching, each one holding a great piece of bread in one fist and a great piece of cheese in the other.
Passing through a stile and down a hill, led into a little dell, and on across a rill in the valley, and up the hill on the other side, till it reached a windmill that stood on the cap of the rise, where the wind bent the trees in swaying motion. Robin looked at the spot and liked it, and for no reason but that his fancy led him, he took the little path and walked down the grassy, sunny slope of the open meadow, and so came to the little dingle, and, ere he knew it, upon 4 lusty fellows that sat with legs outstretched around a goodly feast spread upon the ground. 4 merry beggars were they, and each had slung about his neck a little board that rested upon his breast. One board had written upon it, "I am blind," another, "I am deaf," another, "I am dumb," and the 4th, "Pity the lame one." But although all these troubles written upon the boards seemed so grievous, the 4 stout fellows sat around feasting as merrily as though Cain's wife had never opened the pottle that held misfortunes and let them forth like a cloud of flies to pester us. The deaf man was the first to hear Robin, for he said, "Hark, brothers, I hear someone coming." And the blind man was the first to see him, for he said, "He is an honest man, brothers, and one of like craft to ourselves." Then the dumb man called to him in a great voice and said, "Welcome, brother, come and sit while there is still some of the feast left and a little malmsey in the pottle." At this, the lame man, who had taken off his wooden leg and unstrapped his own leg, and was sitting with it stretched out upon the grass so as to rest it, made room for Robin among them. "We are glad to see thee, brother," said he, holding out the flask of malmsey.
"Marry," quoth Robin, laughing, and weighing the flask in his hands ere he drank, "methinks it is no more than seemly of you all to be glad to see me, seeing that I bring sight to the blind, speech to the dumb, hearing to the deaf, and such a lusty leg to a lame man. I drink to your happiness, brothers, as I may not drink to your health, seeing ye are already hale, wind and limb." At this all grinned, and the blind beggar, who was the chief man among them, and was the broadest-shouldered and most lusty rascal of all, smote Robin upon the shoulder, swearing he was a right merry wag. "Whence comest thou, lad?" asked the dumb man. "Why," quoth Robin, "I came this morning from sleeping overnight in Sherwood." "Is it even so?" said the deaf man. "I would not for all the money we 4 are carrying to Lincoln town sleep one night in Sherwood. If Robin Hood caught one of our trade in his woodlands, he would, methinks, clip his ears." "Methinks he would too," quoth Robin, laughing. "But what money is this that you speak of?" Then up spake the lame man. "Our King, Peter of York," said he, "hath sent us to Lincoln with those moneys that—" "Stay, brother Hodge," quoth the blind man, breaking into the talk. "I would not doubt our brother here, but bear in mind we know him not. What art thou, brother? Upright man, jerkman, clapperdudgeon, dummerer, or Abraham man?" At these words Robin looked from one man to the other with mouth agape. "Truly," quoth he, "I trust I am an upright man, at least I strive to be, but I know not what thou meanest by such jargon, brother. It were much more seemly, methinks, if yon dumb man, who hath a sweet voice, would give us a song."
At these words a silence fell on all, and after a while the blind man spoke again. Quoth he, "Thou dost surely jest when thou sayest that thou dost not understand such words. Answer me this, hast thou ever fibbed a chowsquarens in the roam-pad for the lure in his bung?" "Now out upon it," quoth Robin Hood testily, "an ye make sport of me by pattering such gibberish, it will be ill for you all, I tell you. I have the best part of a mind to crack the heads of all 4 of you, and would do so too, but for the sweet Momsey ye have given me. Brother, pass the pottle, lest it grow cold." But all the 4 beggars leaped to their feet when Robin had done speaking, and the blind man snatched up a heavy knotted cudgel that lay beside him on the grass, as did the others likewise. Then Robin, seeing that things were like to go ill with him, albeit he knew not what all the coil was about, leaped to his feet also, and, catching up his trusty staff, clapped his back against the tree and stood upon his guard against them. "How now?" cried he, twirling his staff betwixt his fingers. "Would you 4 stout fellows set upon one man? Stand back, ye rascals, or I will score your pates till they have as many marks upon them as a pothouse door. Are you mad? I have done you no harm." "Thou liest," quoth the one who pretended to be blind, and who, being the lustiest villain, was the leader of the others. "Thou liest, for thou hast come among us as a vile spy, but thine ears have heard too much for thy body's good, and thou goest not forth from this place unless thou goest feet foremost, for this day thou shalt die. Come, brothers, all together, down with him."
Then, whirling up his cudgel, he rushed upon Robin as an angry bull rushes upon a red rag. But Robin was ready for any happening. Crick, crack! He struck 2 blows as quick as a wink, and down went the blind man, rolling over and over upon the grass. At this, the others bore back, and stood at a little distance, scowling upon Robin. "Come on, ye scum," cried he merrily. "Here be cakes and ale for all. Now, who will be next served?" To this speech the beggars answered never a word, but they looked at Robin as great Blunderbore looked upon stout Jack, the slayer of giants, as though they would fain eat him, body and bones. Nevertheless, they did not care to come nigher to him and his terrible staff. Then, seeing them so hesitate, Robin of a sudden leaped upon them, striking even as he leaped. Down went the dumb man, and away flew his cudgel from his hand as he fell. At this, the others ducked to avoid another blow. Then, taking to their heels, scampered, the one way and the other, as though they had the west wind's boots upon their feet. Robin looked after them, laughing, and thought that never had he seen so fleet a runner as the lame man. But neither of the beggars stopped nor turned around, for each felt in his mind the wind of Robin's cudgel about his ears. Then Robin turned to the 2 stout knaves lying upon the ground. Quoth he, "These fellows spake somewhat about certain moneys they were taking to Lincoln. Methinks I may find it upon this stout blind fellow, who hath as keen a sight as e'er a trained woodsman in Nottingham or Yorkshire."
It were a pity to let sound money stay in the pockets of such thieving knaves. So saying, he stooped over the burly rascal, and searched among his rags and tatters, till presently his fingers fell to leathern pouch slung around his body beneath his patched and tattered coat. This he stripped away, and weighing it in his hands, bethought himself that it was mighty heavy. "It were a sweet thing," said he to himself, "if this were filled with gold instead of copper pence." Then, sitting down upon the grass, he opened the pocket and looked into it. There he found 4 round rolls wrapped up in dressed sheepskin. One of these rolls he opened, then his mouth gaped, and his eyes stared, I wot, as though they would never close again, for what did he see but 50 pounds of bright golden money? He opened the other pockets, and found in each one the same, 50 bright, new-stamped golden pounds. Quoth Robin, "I have oft heard that the Beggars' Guild was over-rich, but never did I think that they sent such sums as this to their treasury. I shall take it with me, for it will be better used for charity and the good of my merry band than in the enriching of such knaves as these."
So saying, he rolled up the money in the sheepskin again, and putting it back in the purse, he thrust the pouch into his own bosom. Then, taking up the flask of Malmsey, he held it toward the two fellows lying on the grass, and quoth he, "Sweet friends, I drink your health, and thank you dearly for what you have so kindly given me this day, and so I wish you good den." Then, taking up his staff, he left the spot and went merrily on his way. But when the two stout beggars that had been rapped upon the head roused themselves and sat up,
And when the others had gotten over their fright and come back, they were as sad and woebegone as 4 frogs in dry weather, for 2 of them had cracked crowns. Their Malmsey was all gone, and they had not so much as a farthing to cross their palms withal. But after Robin left the little dell, he strode along merrily, singing as he went, and so blithe was he, and such a stout beggar, and withal so fresh and clean, that every merry lass he met had a sweet word for him, and felt no fear, while the very dogs that most times hate the sight of a beggar snuffed at his legs in friendly wise and wagged their tails pleasantly, for dogs know an honest man by his smell, and an honest man Robin was, in his own way. Thus he went along till at last he had come to the wayside cross nigh Ollerton, and being somewhat tired, he sat him down to rest upon the grassy bank in front of it. "It groweth nigh time," quoth he to himself, "that I were getting back again to Sherwood Forest, yet it would please me well to have one more merry adventure ere I go back again to my jolly band." So he looked up the road and down the road to see who might come, until at last he saw someone drawing near, riding upon a horse. When the traveler came nigh enough for him to see him well, Robin laughed, for a strange enough figure he cut. He was a thin, wizened man, and to look upon him you could not tell whether he was 30 years old or 60, so dried up was he, even to skin and bone. As for the nag, it was as thin as the rider, and both looked as though they had been baked in Mother Huddle's oven, where folk are dried up so that they live forever. But although Robin laughed at the droll sight, he knew the wayfarer to be a certain rich corn and grocer of Worksop,
who more than once had bought all the grain in the countryside and held it till it reached even famine prices, thus making much money from the needs of poor people. And for this he was hated far and near by everyone that knew aught of him. So, after a while, the corn engrosser came riding up to where Robin sat, whereupon merry Robin stepped straightway forth, in all his rags and tatters, his bags and pouches dangling about him, and laid his hand upon the horse's bridle rein, calling upon the other to stop. "Who art thou, fellow, that doth dare to stop me thus upon the king's highway?" said the lean man, in a dry, sour voice. "Pity a poor beggar," quoth Robin. "Give me but a farthing to buy me a piece of bread." "Now out upon thee," snarled the other. "Such sturdy rogues as thou art are better safe in the prisons or dancing upon nothing, with a hempen collar about the neck than strolling the highways so freely." "Tut," quoth Robin, "how thou talkest! Thou and I are brothers, man. Do we not both take from the poor people that which they can ill spare? Do we not make our livings by doing naught of any good? Do we not both live without touching palm to honest work? Have we either of us ever rubbed thumbs over honestly gained farthings? Go to. We are brothers, I say, only thou art rich and I am poor. Wherefore, I prithee once more, give me a penny." "Dost thou prate so to me, sirrah?" cried the corn engrosser in a rage. "Now I will have thee soundly whipped if I ever catch thee in any town where the law can lay hold of thee. As for giving thee a penny, I swear to thee that I have not so much as a single groat in my purse."
Were Robin Hood himself to take me, he might search me from crown to heel without finding the smallest piece of money upon me. I trust I am too sly to travel so nigh to Sherwood with money in my pouch, and that thief at large in the woods." Then merry Robin looked up and down, as if to see that there was no one nigh, and then, coming close to the corn engrosser, he stood on tiptoe and spake in his ear.
Thinkest thou in sooth that I am a beggar as I seem to be? Look upon me. There is not a grain of dirt upon my hands or my face or my body. Didst thou ever see a beggar so? I tell thee, I am as honest a man as thou art. Look, friend, here he took the purse of money from his breast, and showed to the dazzled eyes of the corn engrosser the bright golden pieces. Friend, these rags serve but to hide an honest rich man from the eyes of Robin Hood. Put up thy money, lad, cried the other quickly. Art thou a fool to trust to beggars' rags to shield thee from Robin Hood? If he caught thee, he would strip thee to the skin, for he hates a lusty beggar as he doth a fat priest or those of my kind. Is it indeed so? Quoth Robin. Had I known this, mayhap I had not come hereabouts in this garb. But I must go forward now, as much depends upon my journeying. Where goest thou, friend? I go to Grantha, said the corn engrosser, but I shall lodge tonight at Newark if I can get so far upon my way. Why, I myself am on the way to Newark, quoth merry Robin, so that, as 2 honest men are better than 1 in roads beset by such a fellow as this Robin Hood, I will jog along with thee, if thou hast no dislike to my company.
Why, as thou art an honest fellow and a rich fellow, said the corn engrosser, I mind not thy company. But in sooth I have no great fondness for beggars. Then forward, quoth Robin, for the day wanes and it will be dark ere we reach Newark. So off they went, the lean horse hobbling along as before, and Robin running beside, albeit he was so quaking with laughter within him that he could hardly stand. Yet he dared not laugh aloud, lest the corn engrosser should suspect something. So they travelled along till they reached a hill just on the outskirts of Sherwood. Here the lean man checked his lean horse into a walk, for the road was steep, and he wished to save his nag's strength, having far to go ere he reached Newark. Then he turned in his saddle and spake to Robin again, for the first time since they had left the cross. Here is thy greatest danger, friend, said he, for here we are nighest to that vile thief Robin Hood, and the place where he dwells. Beyond this we come again to the open, honest country, and so are more safe in our journeying. Alas, quoth Robin, I would that I had as little money by me as thou hast, for this day I fear that Robin Hood will get every groat of my wealth. Then the other looked at Robin and winked cunningly. Quoth he, I tell thee, friend, that I have nigh as much by me as thou hast, but it is hidden so that never a knave in Sherwood could find it. Thou dost surely jest, quoth Robin. How could one hide so much as 200 pounds upon his person?
Now, as thou art so honest a fellow, and withal so much younger than I am, I will tell thee that which I have told to no man in all the world before, and thus thou mayst learn never again to do such a foolish thing as to trust to beggar's garb to guard thee against Robin Hood. Seest thou these clogs upon my feet? Yea, quoth Robin, laughing, truly they are large enough for any man to see, even were his sight as foggy as that of Peter Patter, who never could see when it was time to go to work. Peace, friend, said the corn engrosser, for this is no matter for jesting. The soles of these clogs are not what they seem to be, for each one is a sweet little box, and by twisting the second nail from the toe, the upper of the shoe and part of the sole lifts up like a lid, and in the spaces within are 80 bright golden pounds in each shoe, all wrapped in hair, to keep them from clinking and so telling tales of themselves. When the corn engrosser had told this, Robin broke into a roar of laughter, and, laying his hands upon the bridle rein, stopped the sad-looking nag. Stay, good friend, quoth he, between bursts of merriment, thou art the slyest old fox that e'er I saw in all my life. In the soles of his shoon, quotha! If ever I trust a poor-seeming man again, shave my head and paint it blue. A corn factor, a horse jockey, an estate agent, and a jackdaw for cunningness, say I. And he laughed again till he shook in his shoes with mirth. All this time, the corn engrosser had been staring at Robin, his mouth agape with wonder. "Art thou mad," quoth he, "to talk in this way, so loud and in such a place? Let us forward, and save thy mirth till we are safe and sound at Newark." All this time, the corn engrosser had been staring at Robin, his mouth agape with wonder. "Art thou mad," quoth he, "to talk in this way, so loud and in such a place? Let us forward, and save thy mirth till we are safe and sound at Newark."
"Nay," quoth Robin, the tears of merriment wet on his cheeks. "On second thoughts, I go no farther than here, for I have good friends hereabouts. Thou mayst go forward if thou dost list, thou sweet pretty fellow, but thou must go forward barefoot, for I am afraid that thy shoon must be left behind. Off with them, friend, for I tell thee I have taken a great fancy to them." At these words the corn factor grew pale as a linen napkin. "Who art thou that talkest so?" said he. Then merry Robin laughed again, and quoth he, "Men hereabouts call me Robin Hood. So, sweet friend, thou hadst best do my bidding, and give me thy shoes. Wherefore hasten, I pry thee, or else thou wilt not get to fair Newark town till after dark." At the sound of the name of Robin Hood, the corn factor quaked with fear, so that he had to seize his horse by the mane to save himself from falling off its back. Then straightway, and without more words, he stripped off his clogs and let them fall upon the road. Robin, still holding the bridle rein, stooped and picked them up. Then he said, "Sweet friend, I am used to ask those that I have dealings with to come and feast at Sherwood with me. I will not ask thee, because of our pleasant journey together, for I tell thee there be those in Sherwood that would not be so gentle with thee as I have been. The name of corn engrosser leaves a nasty taste upon the tongue of all honest men. Take a fool's advice of me, and come no more so nigh to Sherwood, or mayhap some day thou mayst of a sudden find a cloth-yard shaft betwixt thy ribs. So with this I give thee good den." Hereupon he clapped his hand to the horse's flank, and off went nag and rider. But the man's face was all bedewed with the sweat of fright, and never again, I wot, was he found so close to Sherwood Forest as he had been this day. Robin stood and looked after him, and when he was fairly gone, turned, laughing, and entered the forest carrying the shoes in his hand. That night in sweet Sherwood, the red fires glowed brightly in wavering light on tree and bush, and all around sat or lay the stout fellows of the band to hear Robin Hood and Little John tell their adventures. All listened closely, and again the woods rang with shouts of laughter. When all was told, Friar Tuck spoke up. "Good master," said he, "thou hast had a pretty time, but still I hold to my saying that the life of the barefoot friar is the merrier of the two." "Nay," quoth Will Stuteley, "I hold with our master that he hath had the pleasanter doings of the two, for he hath had 2 stout bouts at quarterstaff this day." So some of the band held with Robin Hood, and some with Little John. As for me, I think, but I leave it with you to say for yourselves which you hold with. Robin Hood shoots before Queen Eleanor. The high road stretched white and dusty in the hot summer afternoon sun, and the trees stood motionless along the roadside. All across the meadowlands, the hot air danced and quivered, and in the limpid waters of the lowland brook, spanned by a little stone bridge, the fish hung motionless above the yellow gravel, and the dragonfly sat quite still, perched upon the sharp tip of a spike of the rushes, with its wings glistening in the sun. Along the road a youth came riding upon a fair milk-white barb, and the folk that he passed stopped and turned and looked after him, for never had so lovely a lad, or one so gaily clad, been seen in Nottingham before. He could not have been more than 16 years of age, and was as fair as any maiden.
His long yellow hair flowed behind him as he rode along, all clad in silk and velvet, with jewels flashing and dagger jingling against the pommel of the saddle. Thus came the Queen's page, young Richard Partington, from famous London town down into Nottinghamshire, upon Her Majesty's bidding, to seek Robin Hood in Sherwood Forest. The road was hot and dusty, and his journey had been long, for that day he had come all the way from Leicester town, a good 20 miles and more. Wherefore young Partington was right glad when he saw before him a sweet little inn, all shady and cool beneath the trees, in front of the door of which a sign hung pendant, bearing the picture of a blue boar. Here he drew rein, and called loudly for a pottle of Rhenish wine to be brought him, for stout country ale was too coarse a drink for this young gentleman. 5 lusty fellows sat upon the bench beneath the pleasant shade of the wide-spreading oak in front of the inn door, drinking ale and beer, and all stared amain at this fair and gallant lad. 2 of the stoutest of them were clothed in Lincoln green, and a great heavy oaken staff leaned against the gnarled oak tree trunk beside each fellow. The landlord came and brought a pottle of wine and a long narrow glass upon a salver, which he held up to the page as he sat upon his horse. Young Partington poured forth the bright yellow wine, and holding the glass aloft, cried, "Here is to the health and long happiness of my royal mistress, the noble Queen Eleanor, and my journey and her desirings soon have end, and I find a certain stout yeoman men call Robin Hood." At these words all stared, but presently the 2 stout yeomen in Lincoln green began whispering together. Then one of the 2, whom Partington thought to be the tallest and stoutest fellow he had ever beheld, spoke up and said, "What seekest thou of Robin Hood, Sir Page, and what does our good Queen Eleanor wish of him? I ask this of thee, not foolishly, but with reason, for I know somewhat of this stout yeoman." "And thou knowest aught of him, good fellow," said young Partington. "Thou wilt do great service to him, and great pleasure to our royal queen by aiding me to find him." Then up spake the other yeoman, who was a handsome fellow with sunburned face and nut-brown curling hair. "Thou hast an honest look, Sir Page, and our queen is kind and true to all stout yeomen. Methinks I and my friend here might safely guide thee to Robin Hood, for we know where he may be found. Yet I tell thee plainly, we would not for all merry England have aught of harm befell him." "Set thy mind at ease, I bring naught of ill with me," quoth Richard Partington. "I bring a kind message to him from our queen. Therefore, and ye know where he is to be found, I pray you to guide me thither." Then the 2 yeomen looked at one another again, and the tall man said, "Surely it were safe to do this thing, Will," whereat the other nodded. Thereupon both arose, and the tall yeoman said, "We think thou art true, Sir Page, and meanest no harm. Therefore we will guide thee to Robin Hood as thou dost wish." Then Partington paid his score, and the yeomen coming forward, they all straightway departed upon their way. Under the greenwood tree, in the cool shade that spread all around upon the sward, with flickering lights here and there, Robin Hood and many of his band lay upon the soft green grass, while Allan a Dale sang and played upon his sweetly sounding harp. All listened in silence, for young Allan's singing was one of the greatest joys in all the world to them. But as they so listened, there came of a sudden the sound of a horse's feet, and presently Little John and Will Stuteley came forth from the forest path into the open glade, young Richard Partington riding between them upon his milk-white horse. The 3 came toward where Robin Hood sat, all the band staring with might and main, for never had they seen so gay a sight as this young page, nor one so richly clad in silks and velvets and gold and jewels. Then Robin arose and stepped forth to meet him, and Partington leaped from his horse, and doffing his cap of crimson velvet, met Robin as he came. "Now welcome," cried Robin, "now welcome, fair youth, and tell me, I prythee, what bringeth one of so fair a presence, and clad in such noble garb to our poor forest of Sherwood?" Then young Partington said, "If I err not, thou art the famous Robin Hood, and these thy stout band of outlawed yeomen. To thee I bring greetings from our noble Queen Eleanor. Oft hath she heard thee spoken of, and thy merry doings hereabouts, and fain would she behold thy face. Therefore she bids me tell thee, that if thou wilt presently come to London town, she will do all in her power to guard thee against harm, and will send thee back safe to Sherwood Forest again. 4 days hence, in Finsbury Fields, our good King Henry, of great renown, holdeth a grand shooting match, and all the most famous archers of merry England will be thereat. Our queen would fain see thee strive with these, knowing that if thou wilt come, thou wilt, with little doubt, carry off the prize. Therefore she hath sent me with this greeting, and furthermore sends thee, as a sign of great goodwill, this golden ring from off her own fair thumb, which I give herewith into thy hands." Then Robin Hood bowed his head, and taking the ring, kissed it right loyally, and then slipped it upon his little finger. Quoth he, "Sooner would I lose my life than this ring, and ere it departs from me, my hand shall be cold in death or stricken off at the wrist. Fair Sir Page, I will do our queen's bidding, and will presently hie with thee to London. But ere we go, I will feast thee here in the woodlands with the very best we have." "It may not be," said the page. "We have no time to tarry. Therefore get thyself ready straightway, and if there be any of thy band that thou wouldst take with thee, our queen bids me say that she will make them right welcome likewise." "Truly, thou art right," quoth Robin, "and we have but short time to stay. Therefore I will get me ready presently. I will choose 3 of my men only to go with me, and these 3 shall be Little John, mine own true right-hand man, Will Scarlet, my cousin, and Allan a Dale, my minstrel. Go, lads, and get you ready straightway, and we will presently off with all speed that we may. Thou, Will Stutely, shall be the chief of the band while I am gone." Then Little John and Will Scarlet and Allan a Dale ran leaping full of joy to make themselves ready, while Robin also prepared himself for the journey. After a while they all 4 came forth, and a right fair sight they made, for Robin was clad in blue from head to foot, and Little John and Will Scarlet in good Lincoln green, and as for Allan a Dale, he was dressed in scarlet from the crown of his head to the toes of his pointed shoes. Each man wore beneath his cap a little head covering of burnished steel, set with rivets of gold, and underneath his jerkin a coat of linked mail, as fine as carded wool, yet so tough that no arrow could pierce it. Then, seeing all were ready, young Partington mounted his horse again, and the yeomen, having shaken hands all around, the 5 departed upon their way. That night they took up their inn in Melton Mowbray, in Leicestershire, and the next night they lodged at Kettering, in Northamptonshire, and the next at Bedford Town, and the next at St. Albans, in Hertfordshire. This place they left not long after the middle of the night, and travelling fast through the tender dawning of the summer day, when the dews lay shining on the meadows, and faint mists hung in the dales, when the birds sang their sweetest, and the cobwebs beneath the hedges glimmered like fairy cloth of silver, they came at last to the towers and walls of famous London town, while the morn was still young and all golden toward the east. Queen Eleanor sat in her royal bower, through the open casements of which poured the sweet yellow sunshine in great floods of golden light. All about her stood her ladies-in-waiting, chatting in low voices, while she herself sat dreamily where the mild air came softly drifting into the room, laden with the fresh perfumes of the sweet red roses that bloomed in the great garden beneath the wall. To her came one who said that her page, Richard Partington, and 4 stout yeomen waited her pleasure in the court below. Then Queen Eleanor arose joyously and bade them be straightway shown into her presence. Thus Robin Hood and Little John and Will Scarlet and Allen a Dale came before the Queen into her own royal bower. Then Robin kneeled before the Queen with his hands folded upon his breast, saying in simple phrase, "Here am I, Robin Hood. Thou didst bid me come, and lo, I do thy bidding. I give myself to thee as thy true servant, and will do thy commanding, even if it be to the shedding of the last drop of my life's blood." But good Queen Eleanor smiled pleasantly upon him, bidding him to arise. Then she made them all be seated to rest themselves after their long journey. Rich food was brought them, and noble wines, and she had her own pages to wait upon the wants of the yeomen. At last, after they had eaten all they could, she began questioning them of their merry adventures. Then they told her all of the lusty doings herein spoken of, and among others that concerning the Bishop of Hereford and Sir Richard of the Lee, and how the bishop had abided 3 days in Sherwood Forest. At this, the Queen and the ladies about her laughed again and again, for they pictured to themselves the stout bishop abiding in the forest and ranging the woods in lusty sport with Robin and his band. Then, when they had told all that they could bring to mind, the Queen asked Allen to sing to her, for his fame as a minstrel had reached even to the court at London town. So straightway Allen took up his harp in his hand, and without more asking, touched the strings lightly till they all rang sweetly. Then he sang thus: gentle river, bright thy crystal waters flow, sliding where the aspens shiver, gliding where the lilies blow. Singing over pebbled shallows, kissing blossoms bending low, breaking 'neath the dipping swallows, purpling where the breezes blow. Floating on thy breast forever, down thy current I could glide, grief and pain should reach me never on thy bright and gentle tide. So my aching heart seeks thine love, there to find its rest and peace, for through loving, bliss is mine love, and my many troubles cease. Thus Allen sang, and as he sang, all eyes dwelled upon him, and not a sound broke the stillness, and even after he had done, the silence hung for a short space. So the time passed till the hour drew nigh for the holding of the great archery match in Finsbury Fields. A gay sight were famous Finsbury Fields on that bright and sunny morning of lusty summertime. Along the end of the meadow stood the booths for the different bands of archers, for the king's yeomen were divided into companies of 80 men, and each company had a captain over it. So on the bright greensward stood 10 booths of striped canvas, a booth for each band of the royal archers. And at the peak of each fluttered a flag in the mellow air, and the flag was the color that belonged to the captain of each band. From the center booth hung the yellow flag of Tepus, the famous bow-bearer of the king. Next to it, on one hand, was the blue flag of Gilbert of the White Hand, and on the other the blood-red pennant of stout young Clifton of Buckinghamshire. The 7 other archer captains were also men of great renown. Among them were Egbert of Kent and William of Southampton, but those first named were most famous of all. The noise of many voices in talk and laughter came from within the booths, and in and out ran the attendants like ants about an ant-hill. Some bore ale and beer, and some bundles of bowstrings or sheaves of arrows. On each side of the archery range were rows upon rows of seats reaching high aloft, and in the center of the north side was a raised dais for the king and queen, shaded by canvas of gay colors and hung about with streaming silken pennants of red and blue and green and white. As yet the king and queen had not come, but all the other benches were full of people, rising head above head high aloft, till it made the eye dizzy to look upon them. 80 yards distant from the mark from which the archers were to shoot stood 10 fair targets, each target marked by a flag of the color belonging to the band that was to shoot thereat. So all was ready for the coming of the king and queen. At last a great blast of bugles sounded, and into the meadow came riding 6 trumpeters with silver trumpets, from which hung velvet banners heavy with rich workings of silver and gold thread. Behind these came stout King Henry upon a dapple-gray stallion, with his queen beside him upon a milk-white palfrey. On either side of them walked the yeomen of the guard, the bright sunlight flashing from the polished blades of the steel halberds they carried. Behind these came the court in a great crowd, so that presently all the lawn was alive with bright colors, with silk and velvet, with waving plumes and gleaming gold, with flashing jewels and sword hilts, a gallant sight on that bright summer day. Then all the people arose and shouted, so that their voices sounded like the storm upon the Cornish coast, when the dark waves run upon the shore and leap and break, surging amid the rocks. So, amid the roaring and the surging of the people, and the waving of scarfs and kerchiefs, the king and queen came to their place, and, getting down from their horses, mounted the broad stairs that led to the raised platform, and there took their seats on 2 thrones bedecked with purple silks and cloths of silver and of gold. When all was quiet, a bugle sounded, and straightway the archers came marching in order from their tents. 40 score they were in all, as stalwart a band of yeomen as could be found in all the wide world. So they came in orderly fashion and stood in front of the dais where King Henry and his queen sat. King Henry looked up and down their ranks right proudly, for his heart warmed within him at the sight of such a gallant band of yeomen. Then he bade his herald Sir Hugh de Mowbray stand forth and proclaim the rules governing the game. So Sir Hugh stepped to the edge of the platform and spoke in a loud, clear voice, and thus he said, that each man should shoot 7 arrows at the target that belonged to his band, and of the 80 yeomen of each band, the 3 that shot the best should be chosen. These 3 should shoot 3 arrows apiece, and the one that shot the best should again be chosen. Then each of these should again shoot 3 arrows apiece, and the one that shot the best should have the first prize. The one that shot the next best should have the second, and the one that shot the next best should have the third prize. Each of the others should have 80 silver pennies for his shooting. The first prize was to be 20 golden pounds, a silver bugle horn inlaid with gold, and a quiver with 10 white arrows tipped with gold and feathered with the white swan's wing therein. The second prize was to be 50 of the fattest bucks that run on Dallin Lee, to be shot when the yeoman that won them chose. The third prize was to be 2 tons of good Rhenish wine. So Sir Hugh spoke, and when he had done, all the archers waved their bows aloft and shouted. Then each band turned and marched in order back to its place. And now the shooting began, the captains first taking stand and speeding their shafts, and then making room for the men who shot, each in turn after them. 280 shafts were shot in all, and so deftly were they sped that when the shooting was done, each target looked like the back of a hedgehog when the farm dog snuffs at it. A long time was taken in this shooting, and when it was over, the judges came forward, looked carefully at the targets, and proclaimed in a loud voice which 3 had shot the best from the separate bands. Then a great hubbub of voices arose, each man among the crowd that looked on calling for his favorite archer. Then 10 fresh targets were brought forward, and every sound was hushed as the archers took their places once more. This time the shooting was more speedily done, for only 9 shafts were shot by each band. Not an arrow missed the targets, but in that of Gilbert of the White Hand, 5 arrows were in the small white spot that marked the center. Of these 5, 3 were sped by Gilbert. Then the judges came forward again, and looking at the targets, called aloud the names of the archer chosen as the best bowman of each band. Of these, Gilbert of the White Hand led, for 6 of the 10 arrows he had shot had lodged in the center. But stout Tepus and young Clifton trod close upon his heels, yet the others stood a fair chance for the second or third place. And now, amid the roaring of the crowd, those 10 stout fellows that were left went back to their tents to rest for a while and change their bowstrings, for naught must fail at this next round, and no hand must tremble or eye grow dim because of weariness. Then, while the deep buzz and hum of talking sounded all around like the noise of the wind in the leafy forest, Queen Eleanor turned to the king, and quoth she, "Thinkest thou that these yeomen so chosen are the very best archers in all merry England?"
"Yeah, truly," said the king, smiling, for he was well pleased with the sport that he had seen. "And I tell thee that not only are they the best archers in all merry England, but in all the wide world beside." "But what wouldst thou say," quoth Queen Eleanor, "if I were to find 3 archers to match the best 3 yeomen of all thy guard?" "I would say thou hast done what I could not do," said the king, laughing, "for I tell thee there lives not in all the world 3 archers to match Tepus and Gilbert and Clifton of Buckinghamshire." "Now," said the queen, "I know of 3 yeomen, and in truth I have seen them not long since, that I would not fear to match against any 3 that thou canst choose from among all thy 40 archers. And moreover, I will match them here this very day. But I will only match them with thy archers, providing that thou wilt grant a free pardon to all that may come in my behalf." At this the king laughed loud and long. "Truly," said he, "thou art taking up with strange matters for a queen. If thou wilt bring those 3 fellows that thou speakest of, I will promise faithfully to give them free pardon for 40 days, to come or to go wheresoever they please, nor will I harm a hair of their heads in all that time. Moreover, if these that thou bringest shoot better than my yeomen, man for man, they shall have the prizes for themselves according to their shooting. But as thou hast so taken up of a sudden with sports of this kind, hast thou a mind for a wager?" "Why, in sooth," said Queen Eleanor, laughing, "I know naught of such matters. But if thou hast a mind to do somewhat in that way, I will strive to pleasure thee. What wilt thou wager upon thy men?" Then the merry king laughed again, for he dearly loved goodly jest. So he said, amidst his laughter, "I will wager thee 10 tons of Rhenish wine, 10 tons of the stoutest ale, and 10 bows of tempered Spanish yew, with quivers and arrows to match." All that stood around smiled at this, for it seemed a merry wager for a king to give to a queen. But Queen Eleanor bowed her head quietly. "I will take thy wager," said she, "for I know right well where to place those things that thou hast spoken of. Now, who will be on my side in this matter?" And she looked around upon them that stood about, but no one spake or cared to wager upon the queen's side against such archers as Tepus and Gilbert and Clifton. Then the queen spoke again. "Now, who will back me in this wager? Wilt thou, my lord bishop of Hereford?" "Nay," quoth the bishop hastily, "it ill befits one of my cloth to deal in such matters. Moreover, there are no such archers as his majesty's in all the world. Therefore I would but lose my money." "Methinks the thought of thy gold weigheth more heavily with thee than the wrong to thy cloth," said the queen, smiling. And at this a ripple of laughter went around, for everyone knew how fond the bishop was of his money. Then the queen turned to a knight who stood near, whose name was Sir Robert Lee. "Wilt thou back me in this manner?" said she. "Thou art surely rich enough to risk so much for the sake of a lady." "To pleasure my queen I will do it," said Sir Robert Lee, "but for the sake of no other in all the world would I wager a groat, for no man can stand against Tepus and Gilbert and Clifton." Then, turning to the king, Queen Eleanor said, "I want no such aid as Sir Robert giveth me, but against thy wine and beer and stout bows of yew, I wager this girdle all set with jewels from around my waist, and surely that is worth more than thine." "Now I take thy wager," quoth the king. "Send for thy archers straightway. But here come forth the others. Let them shoot, and then I will match those that win against all the world." "So be it," said the queen.
Thereupon, beckoning to young Richard Partington, she whispered something in his ear, and straightway the page bowed and left the place, crossing the meadow to the other side of the range, where he was presently lost in the crowd. At this, all that stood around whispered to one another, wondering what it all meant, and what 3 men the queen was about to set against those famous archers of the king's guard. And now the 10 archers of the king's guard took their stand again, and all the great crowd was hushed to the stillness of death. Slowly and carefully each man shot his shafts, and so deep was the silence that you could hear every arrow rap against the target as it struck it. Then, when the last shaft had sped, a great roar went up, and the shooting, I wot, was well worthy of the sound. Once again, Gilbert had lodged 3 arrows in the white. Tepus came second, with 2 in the white and 1 in the black ring next to it. But stout Clifton had gone down, and Hubert of Suffolk had taken the 3rd place. For while both those 2 good yeomen had lodged 2 in the white, Clifton had lost 1 shot upon the 4th ring, and Hubert came in with 1 in the 3rd. All the archers around Gilbert's booth shouted for joy till their throats were hoarse, tossing their caps aloft and shaking hands with one another. In the midst of all the noise and hubbub, 5 men came walking across the lawn toward the king's pavilion. The first was Richard Partington, and was known to most folk there, but the others were strange to everybody. Beside young Partington walked a yeoman clad in blue, and behind came 3 others, 2 in Lincoln green and 1 in scarlet. This last yeoman carried 3 stout bows of yew tree, 2 fancifully inlaid with silver, and 1 with gold. While these 5 men came walking across the meadow, a messenger came running from the king's booth and summoned Gilbert and Tepus and Hubert to go with him. And now the shouting quickly ceased, for all saw that something unwonted was toward, so the folk stood up in their places and leaned forward to see what was the ado. When Partington and the others came before the spot where the king and queen sat, the 4 yeomen bent their knees and doffed their caps unto her. King Henry leaned far forward and stared at them closely, but the Bishop of Hereford, when he saw their faces, started as though stung by a wasp. He opened his mouth as though about to speak, but, looking up, he saw the queen gazing at him with a smile upon her lips, so he said nothing, but bit his nether lip, while his face was as red as a cherry. Then the queen leaned forward and spake in a clear voice. "Locksley," said she, "I have made a wager with the king that thou and 2 of thy men can outshoot any 3 that he can send against you. Wilt thou do thy best for my sake?" "Yea," quoth Robin Hood, to whom she spake, "I will do my best for thy sake, and, if I fail, I make my vow never to finger bowstring more." Now, although Little John had been somewhat abashed in the queen's bower, he felt himself the sturdy fellow he was when the soles of his feet pressed green grass again. So he said boldly, "Now, blessings on thy sweet face, say I. And there lived a man that would not do his best for thee. I will say not, only I would like to have the cracking of his knave's pate." "Peace, Little John," said Robin Hood hastily, in a low voice. But good Queen Eleanor laughed aloud, and a ripple of merriment sounded all over the booth. The Bishop of Hereford did not laugh, neither did the king, but he turned to the queen, and quoth he, "Who are these men that thou hast brought before us?" Then up spoke the bishop hastily, for he could hold his peace no longer. "Your Majesty," quoth he, "yon fellow in blue is a certain outlawed thief of the mid-country, named Robin Hood. Yon tall, strapping villain goeth by the name of Little John. The other fellow in green is a certain backsliding gentleman, known as Will Scarlet. The man in red is a rogue of a northern minstrel named Allan a Dale." At this speech the king's brows drew together blackly, and he turned to the queen. "Is this true?" said he sternly. "Yea," said the queen, smiling, "the bishop hath told the truth, and truly he should know them well, for he and 2 of his friars spent 3 days in merry sport with Robin Hood in Sherwood Forest. I did little think that the good bishop would so betray his friends. But bear in mind that thou hast pledged thy promise for the safety of these good yeomen for 40 days. "I will keep my promise," said the king, in a deep voice that showed the anger in his heart. "But when these 40 days are gone, let this outlaw look to himself, for mayhap things will not go so smoothly with him as he would like." Then he turned to his archers, who stood near the Sherwood yeomen, listening and wondering at all that passed. Quoth he, "Gilbert, and thou Tepus, and thou Hubert, I have pledged myself that ye shall shoot against these 3 fellows. If ye outshoot the knaves, I will fill your caps with silver pennies. If ye fail, ye shall lose your prizes that ye have won so fairly, and they go to them that shoot against you, man to man. Do your best, lads, and if ye win this bout, ye shall be glad of it to the last days of your life. Go now, and get you gone to the butts." Then the 3 archers of the king turned and went back to their booths, and Robin and his men went to their places at the mark from which they were to shoot. Then they strung their bows and made themselves ready, looking over their quivers of arrows and picking out the roundest and the best feathered. But when the king's archers went to their tents, they told their friends all that had passed, and how that these 4 men were the famous Robin Hood and 3 of his band, to wit, Little John, Will Scarlet, and Allan a Dale.
"I will keep my promise," said the king in a deep voice that showed the anger in his heart. "But when these 40 days are gone, let this outlaw look to himself, for mayhap things will not go so smoothly with him as he would like." Then he turned to his archers, who stood near the Sherwood yeomen, listening and wondering at all that passed. Quoth he, "Gilbert, and thou Tepus, and thou Hubert, I have pledged myself that ye shall shoot against these 3 fellows. If ye outshoot the knaves, I will fill your caps with silver pennies. If ye fail, ye shall lose your prizes that ye have won so fairly, and they go to them that shoot against you, man to man. Do your best, lads, and if ye win this bout, ye shall be glad of it to the last days of your life. Go now, and get you gone to the butts." Then the 3 archers of the king turned and went back to their booths, and Robin and his men went to their places at the mark from which they were to shoot. Then they strung their bows and made themselves ready, looking over their quivers of arrows and picking out the roundest and the best feathered. But when the king's archers went to their tents, they told their friends all that had passed, and how that these 4 men were the famous Robin Hood and 3 of his band, to wit, Little John, Will Scarlet, and Allan a Dale. The news of this buzzed around among the archers in the booths, for there was not a man there that had not heard of these great mid-country yeomen. From the archers the news was taken up by the crowd that looked on at the shooting, so that at last everybody stood up, craning their necks to catch sight of the famous outlaws.
6 fresh targets were now set up, 1 for each man that was to shoot, whereupon Gilbert and Tepus and Hubert came straightway forth from the booths. Then Robin Hood and Gilbert of the White Hand tossed a farthing aloft to see who should lead in the shooting, and the lot fell to Gilbert's side. Thereupon he called upon Hubert of Suffolk to lead. Hubert took his place, planted his foot firmly, and fitted a fair, smooth arrow. Then, breathing upon his fingertips, he drew the string slowly and carefully. The arrow sped true and lodged in the white. Again he shot, and again he smote the clout. A 3rd shaft he sped, but this time failed of the center, and but struck the black, yet not more than a finger's breadth from the white. At this a shout went up, for it was the best shooting that Hubert had yet done that day.
Merry Robin laughed, and quoth he, "Thou wilt have an ill time bettering that round, Will, for it is thy turn next. Brace thy thews, lad, and bring not shame upon Sherwood." Then Will Scarlet took his place, but because of overcaution, he spoiled his target with the very first arrow that he sped, for he hit the next ring to the black, the second from the center. At this Robin bit his lips. "Lad, lad," quoth he, "hold not the string so long. Have I not often told thee what Gaffer Swanpold saith, that overcaution spilleth the milk?" To this Will Scarlet took heed, so the next arrow he shot lodged fairly in the center ring. Again he shot, and again he smote the center. But for all that, stout Hubert had outshot him, and showed the better target. Then all those that looked on clapped their hands for joy, because that Hubert had overcome the stranger.
Quoth the king grimly to the queen, "If thy archers shoot no better than that, thou art like to lose thy wager, lady." But Queen Eleanor smiled, for she looked for better things from Robin Hood and Little John. And now Tiepus took his place to shoot. He also took overheed to what he was about, and so he fell into Will Scarlet's error. The first arrow he struck into the center ring, but the second missed its mark and smote the black. The last arrow was tipped with luck, for it smote the very center of the clout upon the black spot that marked it. Quoth Robin Hood, "That is the sweetest shot that hath been sped this day. But nevertheless, friend Tiepus, thy cake is burned, methinks. Little John, it is thy turn next." So Little John took his place as bidden, and shot his 3 arrows quickly. He never lowered his bow arm in all the shooting, but fitted each shaft with his longbow raised. Yet all 3 of his arrows smote the center within easy distance of the black. At this, no sound of shouting was heard, for although it was the best shooting that had been done that day, the folk of London town did not like to see the stout Tiepus overcome by a fellow from the countryside, even were he as famous as Little John. And now stout Gilbert of the White Hand took his place and shot with the greatest care. And again, for the 3rd time in one day, he struck all 3 shafts into the clout. "Well done, Gilbert," quoth Robin Hood, smiting him upon the shoulder. "I make my vow thou art one of the best archers that ever mine eyes beheld. Thou shouldest be a free and merry ranger like us, lad, for thou art better fitted for the greenwood than for the cobblestones and grey walls of London town."
So saying, he took his place, and drew a fair round arrow from his quiver, which he turned over and over ere he fitted it to his bowstring. Then the king muttered in his beard, "Now, blessed Saint Hubert, if thou wilt but jog that rogue's elbow so as to make him smite even the 2nd ring, I will give 80 waxen candles 3 fingers' breadth in thickness to thy chapel nigh Matching." But it may be Saint Hubert's ears were stuffed with tow, for he seemed not to hear the king's prayer this day. Having gotten 3 shafts to his liking, merry Robin looked carefully to his bowstring ere he shot. "Yea," quoth he to Gilbert, who stood nigh him to watch his shooting, "thou shouldst pay us a visit at merry Sherwood." Here he drew the bowstring to his ear. "In London, here he loosed his shaft. Thou canst find naught to shoot at but rooks and daws. There one can tickle the ribs of the noblest stags in England." So he shot even while he talked, yet the shaft lodged not more than half an inch from the very center. "By my soul," cried Gilbert, "art thou the devil in blue to shoot in that wise?" "Nay," quoth Robin, laughing, "not quite so ill as that, I trust." And he took up another shaft and fitted it to the string. Again he shot, and again he smote his arrow close beside the center. A 3rd time he loosed his bowstring and dropped his arrow just betwixt the other 2 and into the very center, so that the feathers of all 3 were ruffled together, seeming from a distance to be one thick shaft. And now a low murmur ran all among that great crowd, for never before had London seen such shooting as this, and never again would it see it after Robin Hood's day had gone.
All saw that the king's archers were fairly beaten, and stout Gilbert clapped his palm to Robin's. owning that he could never hope to draw such a bowstring as Robin Hood or Little John. But the king, full of wrath, would not have it so, though he knew in his mind that his men could not stand against those fellows. "Nay," cried he, clenching his hands upon the arms of his seat, "Gilbert is not yet beaten. Did he not strike the clout thrice? Although I have lost my wager, he hath not yet lost the first prize. They shall shoot again, and still again, till either he or that knave Robin Hood cometh off the best. Go thou, Sir Hugh, and bid them shoot another round, and another, until one or the other is overcome." Then Sir Hugh, seeing how wroth the king was, said never a word, but went straightway to do his bidding. So he came to where Robin Hood and the others stood, and told them what the king had said. "With all my heart," quoth merry Robin, "I will shoot from this time till tomorrow day, if it can pleasure my most gracious lord and king. Take thy place, Gilbert lad, and shoot." So Gilbert took his place once more, but this time he failed, for, a sudden little wind arising, his shaft missed the centre ring, but by not more than the breadth of a barley straw. "Thy eggs are cracked, Gilbert," quoth Robin, laughing, and straightway he loosed a shaft, and once more smote the white circle of the centre. Then the king arose from his place, and not a word said he, but he looked around with a baleful look, and it would have been an ill day for anyone that he saw with a joyous or a merry look upon his face. Then he and his queen and all the court left the place, but the king's heart was brimming full of wrath.
After the king had gone, all the yeomen of the archer guard came crowding around Robin and Little John and Will and Allen to snatch a look at these famous fellows from the mid-country. And with them came many that had been onlookers at the sport, for the same purpose. Thus it happened presently that the yeomen, to whom Gilbert stood talking, were all surrounded by a crowd of people that formed a ring about them. After a while, the 3 judges that had the giving away of the prizes came forward, and the chief of them all spake to Robin and said, "According to agreement, the first prize belongeth rightly to thee. So here I give thee the silver bugle. Here the quiver of 10 golden arrows. And here a purse of 20 golden pounds." And as he spake, he handed those things to Robin, and then turned to Little John. "To thee," he said, "belongeth the second prize, to wit, 50 of the finest harts that run on Dallin Lee. Thou mayest shoot them whensoever thou dost list." Last of all he turned to stout Hubert. "Thou," said he, "hast held thine own against the yeoman with whom thou didst shoot, and so thou hast kept the prize duly thine, to wit, 2 tuns of good Rhenish wine. These shall be delivered to thee whensoever thou dost list." Then he called upon the other 7 of the king's archers who had last shot, and gave each 80 silver pennies. Then up spake Robin, and quoth he, "This silver bugle I keep in honor of this shooting match, but thou, Gilbert, art the best archer of all the king's guard, and to thee I freely give this purse of gold. Take it, man, and would it were 10 times as much, for thou art a right yeoman, good and true.
Furthermore, to each of the 10 that last shot, I give one of these golden shafts apiece. Keep them always by you, so that ye may tell your grandchildren, and ye are ever blessed with them, that ye are the very stoutest yeomen in all the wide world." At this all shouted aloud, for it pleased them to hear Robin speak so of them. Then up spake Little John. "Good friend Terapis," said he, "I want not those hearts of Dallin Lee that yon stout judge spoke of but now, for in truth we have enow and more than enow in our own country. 20 I give to thee for thine own shooting, and 5 I give to each band for their pleasure." At this another great shout went up, and many tossed their caps aloft and swore among themselves that no better fellows ever walked the sod than Robin Hood and his stout yeomen.
While they so shouted with loud voices, a tall, burly yeoman of the king's guard came forward and plucked Robin by the sleeve. "Good master," quoth he, "I have somewhat to tell thee in thine ear. A silly thing, God wot, for one stout yeoman to tell another. But a young peacock of a page, one Richard Partington, was seeking thee without avail in the crowd, and, not being able to find thee, told me that he bore a message to thee from a certain lady that thou wottest of. This message he bade me tell thee privily, word for word, and thus it was. Let me see, I trust I have forgot it not. Yea, thus it was. The lion growls, beware thy head." "Is it so?" quoth Robin, starting, for he knew right well that it was the queen sent the message, and that she spake of the king's wrath.
"Now I thank thee, good fellow, for thou hast done me greater service than thou knowest of this day." Then he called his 3 yeomen together and told them privately that they had best be jogging, as it was like to be ill for them so nigh merry London town. So, without tarrying longer, they made their way through the crowd until they had come out from the press. Then, without stopping, they left London town and started away northward.